Welcome to the Careers by Jen podcast, episode 186. Today on the podcast, Jen elaborates on how to train someone at work when you're not a teacher. Coercion, blackmail, and the ringing of bells are all sold separately.
You're listening to the Careers by Jen podcast with me, Jen Swanson, the podcast that helps you to get the job, love your work, and advance your career. I'm a trained college teacher. I have a diploma in college instruction. I have a master's degree in leadership and more than 25 years of experience in classroom teaching and facilitation, as well as years of online teaching experience. So give me a new employee to train, and I am happy as a clam. I love teaching, and I do it all the time in every role that I'm in, including ministry. But not everyone has that kind of background. Maybe you've never taught anyone anything in your whole life. Maybe you feel frustrated when you try to explain something to someone and they still don't get it, even when it seems super obvious to you. Your manager tells you that you get to have someone trailing around behind you for the next several days or weeks and that you have to mentor or train them. And your whole self just wants to yell, no, but you can't because it's part of your job. Well, today we're going to talk about how to do it, how to be a good trainer when you know that you aren't a teacher, when teaching is not maybe your gift or you're not sure where to start. We're going to talk about how to make it easier for you and for the person that you have to train. And we're going to start by answering this question. What one thing will help you the most when training a new hire? We'll get to that answer right after this.
Are you procrastinating? Do you want to start a job search but aren't quite sure where to begin? Is it all just a little overwhelming? At Careers by Jen, we have a 5-day Jumpstart Your Job Search Challenge to help you get unstuck and move toward finding your dream job. Every day for 5 days, you'll receive an email to your inbox that asks you to complete one task. Every task you complete moves you closer toward your goal. The best part about this challenge is that it's absolutely free. Come over to careersbyjen.com and you'll see the 5-day Jumpstart Your Job Search Challenge on the right-hand side of the screen. Click on the image of Jen, sign up with your email address, and you'll be 5 days closer to reaching your goal. Why wait when you can get busy? Visit careersbyjen.com after this podcast.
What one thing will help you the most when training a new hire? Well, how about a little compassion for the new hire or the new person that you have to train and for yourself? Because you were new once too. So think back to how you felt your first day or the first few days or weeks even in your new job. You might have felt a little lost, inadequate, afraid to make mistakes, maybe even afraid to ask questions. You might have wondered if anyone would like you, or if you were able to learn fast enough to be competent by the time the probationary period was over. There are all sorts of thoughts and feelings running through a new person's mind and heart, and it's good to remember that you were there once too. So some compassion for the person you are training will help. And as I have said, have some compassion for yourself too, because training someone is exhausting. It's so much easier just to do your job rather than to have to explain every single thing that you're doing. And if you have any kind of control freakishness in you, like I do, then I'm speaking from experience there. It can be excruciatingly hard to watch someone else do your work, particularly when they're new and they're learning and they're super slow, or they're doing things differently, or they're making mistakes, etc. So being aware that you too are going to be tired and sometimes frustrated and impatient, and depending on the new employee, maybe a little intimidated if they happen to be quick and clever and show great potential, then you're going to have to treat yourself with a little bit of gentleness and maybe get some extra sleep and do something nice for yourself after work. One of my roles in my teaching career was to supervise students as they did a practicum in a hospital. The students were placed with a preceptor, and they were to learn from that person for a number of weeks, and I watched and learned so much from the interactions between my students and the preceptors over the years. Some preceptors were fantastic. They were natural teachers. They were patient and they were kind, and they were just fine with letting the students take over more and more of the work as they got better and more comfortable at it. But others were territorial and defensive and sometimes downright mean. My job was to know when to observe and when to intervene, and all the while build relationship with the preceptors and to ensure that the hours and hours of work, and I might add that these were unpaid hours, because in the situation I was in, there were no extra bonuses or extra pay for all the work these preceptors had to put in. My job was to ensure that they felt appreciated, and that the students thanked them and gave them the respect that they deserved, listened to them, and showed them gratitude for sharing their wisdom and experience. And sometimes that was really easy to do when the preceptor was great, and other times it was terribly hard to do. And still, I encouraged the student to do it, and sometimes I know it was done grudgingly, but it can be a very difficult situation when the training is not your idea, when it's forced upon you, and when you have to expend all this extra energy teaching somebody who might be a bit threatening to your own job security. I learned a lot. And I know from having been a preceptor myself many times and having to train other people, often even before I got into teaching, that it's not an easy role to be in. So the first thing, one of the most important things, is compassion all around. The second thing to do is to get prepared. Have some kind of a plan as to how you're going to train. What tasks do they need to learn, and in what order? And that's why when they start, you can be organized with step-by-step info and some kind of strategy. This way you won't forget anything. And so I suggest before they begin, get yourself a little bit ready. Maybe sit down and write out a plan and remind yourself of all the things that you automatically know how to do because you've been doing it for a while, but maybe somebody brand new would not. And so you might even prepare a checklist or some kind of formula to follow for them if you have time to do that. The third thing to do is to set expectations and boundaries. The whole training thing is going to go far more smoothly if you both know who is supposed to be doing what and when. And as you begin to trust the work of the new hire or the new trainee more and more, you can let them do more and more of the work. But trust doesn't just happen, as you know. So laying out either in writing or verbally what your trainee can and cannot do each day is going to allow you to focus and proceed with confidence. So if the very first day is about orientation, is about observation, then stick to that. Maybe give them a tour of the place. Introduce them to everyone you run across in the workplace, because then the person feels welcomed and they can put some names to faces and people can know who they are. And then as they watch you work, if day one is observation only, explain what you're doing and why you're doing it as you go. One tip is to ask the trainee to take notes so that you don't have to repeat yourself over and over again. And I know some people don't like taking notes. Some people don't feel that they have to because they have good memories. But I very plainly say, I'd appreciate if you'd take notes today as we go through things so I don't have to repeat myself too often. It would help both of us if you would write things down. The bonus about that is that the person will then have something they can go back over again that evening, the next day, or in the coming weeks if they forget how to do something. And then your time talking and explaining and telling them why this has to be done or in what order is not wasted, because sometimes it's overwhelming for a new person to remember every single little detail. So taking notes is something I strongly, strongly encourage the new trainee to do. Invite them to ask questions and then answer them when they ask. I've watched trainers refuse to answer questions with comments like, "Don't you know that yet?" Or "You should already know that." And it's embarrassing and it's rude and it's not helpful. However, having said that, if the trainee has asked the same question 15 times, then you know it's because the boundaries and the expectations were not clearly set. I've even said things like, "I'm happy to answer the same question 2 or 3 times, but not 4 or 5 more. So pay attention when I answer, write stuff down so that you can review it at the end of the day, and then you will progress faster and I won't get frustrated." Most people respect that if you are clear and if you are honest, and it's a really good idea to set your expectations and have the trainee set theirs as well. And maybe you are prone to micromanagement and you need to be careful of that. So if you've given the person the instructions and then allowed them to do it, you might want to just step back. And if they need some help, let them know that you're open to being asked, but see what they can do on their own. Because for some people, that's the absolute best way to learn is by trial and error. At the start of each day, sit down with your trainee and set the goals for that day, just for that day, even maybe for just that morning. For example, today you're going to answer all the phone calls. If you don't know the answer to something, ask if you can put the person on hold and then come and ask me. But today you're going to answer all of the calls. If you get overwhelmed, just signal to me and I'll jump in, and that's not a problem. But let's have you try it today. That would be an example of goal setting. And then at the end of the day, review the goals and talk with your trainee about how they were or weren't met. And this might sound all formal, and it doesn't have to be formal. It can be as simple as asking, "How did you feel today went? How do you think you did today? What do you want to do more of? And what could you use more practice doing? And is there anything that you'd like more explanation on?" It can be just really casual, but it's a really good idea to review goals and to see where you're at the end of each day. And then after they give you their self-evaluation, after they tell you how they think they're doing, you can agree or disagree. And you can do that kindly. Let them know from your perspective what they might be able to work on the next day, what you've noticed. And be sure, again, to ask them to review their notes before the start of the next day. It's their homework. If you frame it as how they can learn faster, as how they can ace their training, then asking for these expectations to be met is not really a hard sell. You might even ask them to bring you any questions they think of after work to start the next day with, and let them know that you'd be happy to answer them. You are in charge of their training. You've been given that role to be in charge of their training. Now, of course, they are responsible for learning, but if you've been asked to train, then the way you train is up to you. So it's perfectly okay to have it somewhat structured. If you're organized and you set goals and you set expectations and you review them, the training's going to go much more smoothly. And I find that if everyone knows who is doing what each day, the whole process is so much better. Another tip is to share your insider information. Be generous. I don't mean gossip. That's the last thing you want to share. It's not professional at all. But what I mean is your insider tips and tricks that a brand new person is not ever going to be able to know. If you are generous in your offering, you'll gain respect. You'll be developing a colleague. You'll be developing someone you can work with and that you can each go to in the future. If you're not generous and you keep your best work secrets to yourself in the competitive spirit, you will be less effective as a trainer, and you might even get asked later, "How come you didn't tell me that?" So my suggestion is don't hold back. Share your wisdom generally. and generously. It's good karma. Okay, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, I've got 5 more really key tips to help you effectively and efficiently train someone when you aren't actually a teacher. Do you want someone to listen? Do you need help setting goals for yourself? Do you want someone to keep you accountable for your progress and to ask good questions that will help to move you toward your success? Have you got a resume that you want reviewed or updated? Do you need help deciding what kind of work you'd like to transition into? If any of these sound like you, I've got some coaching spaces open at Careers by Jen, and I would be happy to work with you to achieve your goals. From a single session resume review to multi-session career or life coaching, there are several packages to choose from. Go to careersbyjen.com, click on online programs, and you will see the coaching packages on the courses page. Select your package and let's get started on your future today. Hey, if you're enjoying this podcast, why not leave us a review in iTunes and share this show with someone that you know who has to train a new hire or a new person coming into a new role? The more you share, the more I can help. And all you have to do is search Careers by Jen podcast in your iTunes store and then leave us a review. I would really appreciate it. Okay, 5 more tips for you, and my first one is actually something you might want to do on the first day with this new person, and that is to find out their personal learning style. How do they learn best? Do they learn best from watching and listening, or are they hands-on learners? Only they will know. And if you're able to tailor your training once you know after the observation day or the introductory orientation, if you can tailor your training to their best learning style, well, things are going to go far more easily for both of you. One thing to be careful of here is that if they say they learn best by watching and they seem reluctant to actually do anything after many days or many hours, depending on how long your training is, then you could be up against a stalling tactic. I once wanted a trainee to start answering the phones after the second day on a hospital unit one time, and she kept telling me she wanted to listen more closely to what I said and how I said things. And that was fine. That worked for a little while. And then eventually I figured out she was actually terrified to answer the phone. It rang a lot, and there were a lot of unknowns on the other end of the phone. And so her desire to observe was actually a stalling tactic. So I suggested instead that she try it. I would sit right next to her. I would get her to answer the phone, and I would offer constructive feedback. And, she really, really didn't want to. But I told her she had to, and she answered the phone, and guess what? She survived. She did just fine. After a few phone conversations, she was answering all the calls, and it was no longer an issue. She'd overcome the fear. She realized that the hold button was her friend, and it was just getting over the first one that she needed a little, shall we say, kick in the pants to get going, a little bit of encouragement. The next tip I have is to ask your trainee questions. If you've already explained how to do something once or twice, when you're helpful, you're their security blanket, they might just be asking you questions for confirmation. So when they ask you a question that you know they know how to do or they know the answer to, you can counter with, well, what do you think you should do next? And see what happens. And then you can confirm if they're correct or not. It could just be an insecurity and seeking confirmation on their part. The other thing you can also do is ask them pop quiz type questions if you've got a slow moment to help reinforce what they're learning. Now, you don't want to get annoying with that, but I've watched people, trainers, preceptors, do it to be helpful. And do it, you don't want to do it in front of other people because that could be embarrassing, especially if the person doesn't know the answer or they're worried about getting it wrong. But if you ask them from time to time, 1 or 2 questions to make sure that you know what you're teaching is sinking in, it's kind of like a review for the person, and it can be really, really effective. So think about that every once in a while. You could be walking to the elevator for lunch, and if this happened, what would you do? Or do you remember where this is? Or do you remember, what the code is for whatever? I mean, it depends on what your job is, but think about that. It might be worthwhile throwing them a pop quiz question or two every once in a while. My third tip is to show the person where to find resources for further learning. Are there employee manuals that are online, or are they old school binders somewhere stored in your workplace that they need to know about or they should know about, so that when they've got a little bit of downtime, they could sit and go through them? Is there safety information? Are there safety videos or things that they should be paying attention to? Do they know where to find basic things like their paycheck information or company policies and procedures and safety information? What resources can you share with your trainee that would be helpful to them, so that, phone numbers, lists of, where to find things online that they might need to access often, where to phone so-and-so and where to look for things. That is really helpful. Where can they find resources? Help them out with that. The fourth last tip, or dare I say the penultimate tip, is to be available. Just to be available. There will come a time in your training when hopefully you'll be able to step back and do your own work or do other stuff while they begin to fly on their own. Let the trainee know that if they run into trouble or they have questions, they can call you or they can come find you and ask, so that they know that you are still there as a resource, even though they should be able to begin doing their own work now without you there. So be available as a resource once they're able to be self-sufficient. It's really comforting to know, as a person who's brand new, that I can call the person who's trained me or who has mentored me if I run into trouble or I forget how to do something, next week, the week after next month, etc. It's good to know there's a friendly face and somebody who's willing to help. And so just be available for that person. And it's not always that obvious. You might want to actually say that. If you need anything, let me know. And the last tip that I have is to look after the basic stuff on the first day with them. Show them where the key to the bathroom is, where the bathroom is located, where the lunchroom is, or the coffee shop, or whatever. Maybe even invite them to have lunch with you at the beginning so they aren't alone and feeling awkward in the lunchroom, not knowing where to sit or not knowing who to hang out with. Show them where to stash their coat or their purse or their briefcase or their belongings or their shoes. I mean, it depends on what kind of work you're doing. But show them where they can put their things that's safe and secure at the start of the day. Make sure they have passwords to the computer or know where to get one if there's a computer. If there are passcodes to get through doors, if they need to have a name badge, and other things that haven't been taken care of yet, make sure you share those things and help them get those things that they need. Maybe show them where the human resources is, or where payroll might be, or anything that they might need to know. Take this newbie under your wing for a while and look after them. And this kind of action, this kind of care will reflect well on you. You will be appreciated for your kindness and for your care and your professionalism. Remember that the better you train the person, the better your team will be for it. It looks good on a resume, and that's a good thing. You've been listening to Careers by Jen with Jen Swanson. If you like what you heard, please share this. If every single person listening today shared this episode with just one friend, our audience would be twice as big just like that. And the more people we can help with our content, the better. So help out a friend and help grow our audience by sharing this show with someone you know who would benefit from the content. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do that, and together we can make a difference. Until next time, take good care.